All right. Hey, thank you, Alicia. As Alicia said, my name is Ron Tickle. My organization and department is responsible for helping DoD components fulfill their federal trust responsibilities to Native Americans. In addition to obligations to Native Hawaiian organizations as outlined in federal laws and policies, and a Department of Defense Instruction 4710.03, consultation with Native Hawaiian organizations. It is my hope that the first of today's webinars, the United States and Hawaii, an historical overview, will build awareness of key events in Native Hawaiian history and lend perspective to how Native Hawaiians perceive the presence of the U.S. military in the islands. Second of today's webinar at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, recognizing Native Hawaiians' reserved rights, will outline the foundations in the 1840 Hawaiian Constitution and other documents of a uniquely Native Hawaiian system of private land ownership and how the system reserved rights for the Native Hawaiian people in the Crown and government lands currently occupied by military installations, as well as access through private and public lands, including lands used by the military. We aim for these sessions to support a foundational understanding of Native Hawaiian history, improve sensitivity to cultural interactions, support ethical and professional practices in Hawaii. We are very fortunate to have collaborated with today's featured speaker, Dr. Davianna Pomaika'i McGregor, Professor Emeritus of Ethnic Studies and Oral History at the University of Hawai'i, Manoa. She is historian of Hawaii and the Pacific. Dr. McGregor's ongoing research endeavors have focused on documenting the persistence of traditional Hawaiian cultural customs, beliefs, and practices in rural Hawaiian communities. Her 2007 University of Hawaii press book, sorry about that, Kuaina, Living Hawaiian Culture, won the Kenneth W. Baldridge Prize for Best Book in any field of history written by a resident of Hawaii from 2005 to 2007. Since 2009, she has been the principal Native Hawaiian instructor for the DoD-sponsored in-person Native Hawaiian Cultural Communications and Consultation course held annually for civilians and military personnel based in Hawaii. Dr. McGregor, mahalo nui. Thank you very much for honoring us by sharing your knowledge with us today. We look forward to your presentation. Thank you.
So aloha, aloha kako, everyone. I'm going to start with a chant that speaks of the island of Kaho'olawe, which was a military training range from 1941 through 1990 and became the center of Native Hawaiian resistance to the destruction of our lands and questioning the ongoing role of the United States in Hawaii. And so my presentation looks at U.S. and Hawaii, as a historical overview. Okay. So trying to advance there. Uina, kaulo nei kapuai kaua. Vehe vehe mai ne ka hiau, ku mai nā waa kaulua, pue ke kanaka mai kaua mai, ku kulu ka iwi o ka aina, ailani ko he, malama lama, ho'ohiki ke moku, ya kanaloa, akua ka moana ili, he aloha pili kau no keia aina e. So it talks of the importance of this island for the training of wayfinders. And in the chant, it's talking about the returning of men who've traveled over the seas and they see Kaho'olawe, their home, and they're excited to be home. And the island is lit up, and they dedicate the island to Kanaloa, the god of the ocean. And this chant was given to us by Uncle Harry Kunihi Mitchell, who was from Honua Ula, across the channel from Kaho'olawe. And the rest of the chant, I just did the first verse, and the rest of the chant speaks of name places on the island, the training center, the Keawe'iki, one of the kahuna for the training of the navigators. And this chant he learned from his kupuna serving them ava, as he says, sitting at their feet. My kumu, I want to acknowledge for Ko'olave, George Helm, Noah Emmett Aluli, Auntie Edith Kanakaole, Nanani Kanakaole, Edward and Pualani Kanahele, Parley Kanakaole, and there are countless kupuna from Hawaii, Maui, Molokai, Lanai, Oahu, and Kauai. And beginning with World War II, as I explained, the island was used as a military bombing and live fire training center. These are targets that were on the land, made from tires painted white, and 2 large targets for ship-to-shore shelling. In January 1976, the Protect Ko'olawe Ohana began a movement to stop the bombing and to end all military training on the island. And this succeeded on October 22, 1990. And eventually the island was returned to the state of Hawaii in 1994. And the state of Hawaii holds the island in trust for eventual transfer to the sovereign Hawaiian governing entity. I'm a member of the Protect Ko'olawe Ohana, which has provided protection and healing for the island. We continue to work to heal the island in conjunction with the State of Hawaii Kaho'olawe Island Reserve Commission for over 40 years of aloha aina, as we say. And the island will be the first lands of a sovereign Hawaiian nation. So I'm going to share a Native Hawaiian perspective on the key points in the history of the U.S. and Hawaii relations, and which shapes Native Hawaiian viewpoints about the military and its role in Hawaii. I'm going to quote from, and now it's not, I'm going to quote and refer to Public Law 103150, which is the apology law that was signed into law in November 1993, shown here, passed by Congress by a majority of both the Senate and the House, signed into law by President Clinton in November 1993 on the 100th anniversary of the overthrow of the Hawaiian monarchy by the U.S. government. Witnessing the signature there from left to right is then Vice President Al Gore, Senator Daniel Inouye, Congresswoman Patsy Mink, Congressman Neil Abercrombie, and Senator Akaka, our Hawaii delegation at the time. The beginning of the Public Law 103150 says, whereas prior to the arrival of the first Europeans in 1778, the Native Hawaiian people lived in a highly organized, self-sufficient, subsistent social system based on communal land tenure with a sophisticated language, culture, and religion. Now, these points are all important to note, and why they were noted is that the fact that we were self-sufficient, had our own independent social system, which was based on our own management of our land and our territory, with a common language and culture as reflected in our religious practices. These are all the key points of acknowledgement of a nation by the United Nations, independent nations, with the right of self-determination. And this is the foundation for American law relating to Native Americans, acknowledging that Native American nations, as well as Native Hawaiians, were pre-existing sovereigns with our own sovereign government and our own self-governance prior to the existence of the United States. And for this reason, it creates the foundation for a separate relationship on a government-to-government basis between Indigenous peoples, including Native Hawaiian peoples, and the U.S. government. Native Hawaiians trace our ancestry to Polynesian voyagers, chiefs, navigators, farmers, fishers, scientists, and beyond those living ancestors to the forces of nature itself. And the forces of nature were honored by Native Hawaiian ancestors as our akua, our spiritual entities, the natural life forces of the world. And Native Hawaiians trace through our genealogies to these natural life forces. The principal life forces that are in all the genealogies are the Papa, the Earth Mother, and Wakea, the Sky Father. And shown in this picture is the peak of Mauna a Wakea, which means the mountain that is the descendant, the son of Wakea. And it kind of epitomizes this mating between earth and sky. Other of our natural life forces honored as deities was Kani, god of living fresh water sources, and the heat force of the sun, that and the daily passage and seasonal passages of the sun, and the heat of the earth through the Kani force, the heat of the sun. The other is Kanaloa, the god of the ocean and its currents and rains, which was honored in the chant that I started with. And Kanaloa is also associated with the heat of the sun in the afternoon and setting, and in the seasonal change of winter, the winter's time. Lono is another of our natural life forces honored as a deity. Lono is the natural life force that brings the rains for our wet season that begins around October and goes through March, and all of the weather system that involved with the heavy clouds, the system that comes in from the south, bringing these thunderstorms, and the rains that replenish our water table is all associated and honored as the Lono. And the Ku, or Ku. And Ku is also Ku'ula. This is an example of a Ku'ula, our fishing shrine, honoring the Ku form, that natural life force, as the life force in the ocean that brings the marine life, as well as certain features in our land and for cultivation. So our islands of Hawaii are the most isolated landmass in the world, and our islands are therefore home to a diversity of unique endemic species of plants as well as animals. That was the Ku Hinahina Kahakai. This is the monk seal. And initial human settlement and the introduction inadvertently of the Polynesian rat and pig led to ecological disruption. And what we see then is that Hawaiian spiritual beliefs and practices evolved to protect fragile island resources. And that understanding, that practice is aloha aina, or love, respect of the land. It also translates into love and respect of our nation, and love and respect of the natural life forces of the aina, everything that feeds us, the land, the atmosphere, the ocean, all aloha aina. The other aspect of our traditional ancestral practices in honoring and protecting the land was that of lokahi, the unity and balance of humans with nature and deity, was also at the core. Lokahi was at the core of Hawaiian belief system. And the Hawaiians developed a very sophisticated system of irrigation and terracing, as was referred to in the first chant that I said, this idea of the importance of irrigation and networking and the practice of aloha aina. And these practices also referred to the stewardship of the ocean as well. So when we look at Hawaiian use of the land, even though we saw initial disruption with the introduction, the clearing of land for food, for planting food, as well as the impact of the pigs, as well as the introduced rats, we see that the Hawaiian footprint in terms of dislocation of endemic species was about 14.1% on the island of Oahu. And this is the pre-contact, the footprint from contact up through pre-contact to contact. But by comparison, in a period of time when there is no practice of conservation and protection of the resources, the modern footprint on the island of Oahu is 83% of the island. And you can see the wetlands, and it's primarily our mountains that have not been impacted by the modern economy. So if we look at the period of Native Hawaiian settlement in the island by our genealogies, not by archaeology. Archaeology has our presence in the islands much later, but our genealogies show our presence in the island as early as 600 BC to around 300 AD. And this is a period when we have canoe loads of families arriving from the Marquesas as well as Tahiti. And in our genealogies, it goes from Paliku to Wākea in this period of time. And then we have a long period of establishment and development of a unique Hawaiian culture and social system between 300 and 1000 AD, where in Hawaii now we have a common ancestry and heritage spoken of in the public law, a clause that I started with. We have a shared culture, language, and all of this is unique to the Hawaiian Islands and distinct from the Polynesian ancestors. The land was managed according to the organic organic use of the landscape, so that where Hawaiians lived in as family units, extended families, they had access to all that they needed for their survival. And this is what we call ahupua'a, or watershed management, from the ridge out to the reef, from the shoreline up to the mountains, with a stream or flowing through it is a typical ahupua'a. You have a stream providing freshwater access for domestic uses, drinking water especially, but also for cultivation of taro, our main crop, which was grown in water pond fields, and then access and cultivation through the valley floors, and then up on the ridges, up through the ridges, and use of being able to harvest trees for building homes and carving of canoes, as well as other kind of plants besides taro, banana, ulu, breadfruit, for the survival of the population. Between 1000 and 1500 AD, we have the expansion and intensification of cultivation and an emergence of a hierarchical system of governance. So this is a period of dynamic geometric growth of the population and technological innovation with intense production of the land, emergence of a stratified social system. And it's also a period of intentional long voyaging between Hawaii and Tahiti through around 1250. And then around 1400, we have in 1000, the islands were managed through chiefs of each district. And around 1500, these chiefs in each district, that is, they consolidate the management of these ahupua'a watershed into bigger districts, what we call moku. And we have the establishment of ali'i moku, the district chiefs, around 1000. This shows the districts on Oahu. And then these district chiefs around 1500 coalesce into island councils. And each island council of these chiefs select a mo'i, an overall ruling chief for that island or that cluster of islands. And so between 1500 and 1650, we have 4 island chiefdoms ruled by 4 rulers, kings, you might say, but ali'i nui, as they're called. Kauai and Ihau is one such chiefdom, Oahu another, Maui Nui, Maui, Lanai, and Koholave, sometimes including Molokai, and then the island of Hawaii. So in this historic period from 1650 to 1795, then we have these 4 island chiefdoms until in 1795, the Hawaii island chief, King Kamehameha, unites all of the islands except Kauai and Niihau. And in 1810, the Kauai island chief agrees to become a tribute chief to Kamehameha I, and as of 1810, Hawaii has a central government under the rule of Kamehameha I. In 1840, then, his son, Kamehameha III, transformed this absolute monarchy into a constitutional monarchy. And if we reflect upon the impact of contact, contact begins in 1778. The unification of the islands is 1795 to 1810. And through contact, which was primarily with ships engaged in fur and sandalwood trading between the Northwest Pacific and China, the landscapes are degraded. Sandalwood is harvested almost to extinction, and we see the introduction of diseases which decimates the Hawaiian population. We see the increase of wars led by Kamehameha I to centralize the government. And by the time that Kamehameha passes in 1819, we have the abolition of the traditional religion. So disease, wars, the abolition of our traditional religion, all the impact of the influence of the fur and sandalwood trades. And the population estimate of Native Hawaiians at the time of contact in 1778, the Cook estimate was 250,000. We've had some estimates as high as 800,000, or somewhere between that, around 400,000. When the first census was taken by the missionaries in 1823, they estimated 135,000 Kanaka Maoli, Hawaiians of pure Hawaiian ancestry. So if you take the 250,000 down to 135,000, that's more than half of the population has died without having heirs, and you have this dramatic decimation of the Hawaiian population. If you take the 400,000 figure, that's 2/3 of the Hawaiian population that died within the first 50 years of contact. And if you take the 800,000 figure, that's 90% of the population dying within the first 50 years of contact. And one of the greatest impacts on the Hawaiian population was the cholera pandemic of 1804, which Hawaiians called Ma'ioku'u. And our Hawaiian historians say that in 1804, half of our population died because of this cholera pandemic. So with the passing of Kamehameha in 1819 and the abolition of the traditional Hawaiian religion, or kapu, it coincides with the growth of American influence. And in 1820, just about 8 or so months after the abolition of the traditional religion, the first missionaries out of New England, Presbyterian missionaries, arrive in the Hawaiian Islands and settle on the island of Hawaii and Oahu and Maui, and begin to convert Native Hawaiians to Christianity. Also, we have the whaling industry beginning, the hunting of sperm whales for their oil, and merchants arriving to receive the processed whale oil and to transport it back to New England, to then bring back manufactured goods to sustain the whaling trade in Hawaii. So merchants, missionaries, whalers have growing influence in the islands and are resident now for the first time in the period between 1778 and 1820, mostly the contact with foreigners is through trading ships, but a very small resident population. But beginning in 1820, you have then a growing resident population of American missionaries, merchants, and whalers. We see also that the traditional crops of taro and sweet potato and banana and ulu are replaced with cash crops of Irish potato and citrus fruits and other cash crops for commercial whaling, eventually by 1860 leading to the plantations that raise sugar for the American market. These resident foreign interests begin to demand rights of residency and of especially of citizenship. And so, and when their demands are not met, and I'm talking American influence, but also you have British and French and German residents as well. And in the period from 1820 to 1840, until we have a constitutional monarchy, there are disputes that arise between the foreigners that are usually resolved through gunboat diplomacy. The intervention in 1839 of Captain Laplace from France, demanding that the French Catholic missionaries be allowed lands and the ability to live in Hawaii and convert Hawaiians to Catholicism, as well as to allow French goods to be sold in Hawaii, especially French liquors. The intervention in 1843 of Great Britain, demanding that their consul general be allowed to have land that he claims was sold to him, although it was just granted under a lease agreement from the chiefs. And earlier in 1826, the intervention of an American gunboat demanding payment of sandalwood debts owed to American sandalwood traders. But we have a constitutional monarchy established in 1840, and these resident foreigners also begin now as citizens to demand the right of private ownership of land in Hawaii. And finally, between 1846 and 1850, the king and the Council of Chiefs institute a process for establishing a system of private property, which is, however, unique to Hawaii, and is the subject of the next webinar presentation that I will give. By 1862, with the establishment of private property in the islands on Oahu, 75% of the land on Oahu is in foreign hands, except in the district of Wailua, where 50% is owned by foreigners. And so this process of private property ownership then is a process of separating many Hawaiians from their ancestral lands, where they now become tenants on former ancestral lands. And we have now, by 1860, through the turn of the century, cattle ranches and plantations becoming the centerpiece of the economy in Hawaii, an economy that's dominated by American planters, merchants still, bankers, businessmen, and ranchers. So in the period from late 19th century into the 20th century, Hawaii was at the nexus between American capital, investing in plantations and ranches, and Asian labor markets, providing the labor to grow the sugar and later pineapple in Hawaii. Although on the ranches, it was mainly Native Hawaiian paniolo or cowboys. But between 1840, with the establishment of the Constitution, and in 1842, we have the U.S. acknowledging the independence of Hawaii, and followed in 1843 by Great Britain and France, and then a number of European as well as Asian countries, all recognizing Hawaii as being independent. And United States itself enters into treaties with the independent government in 1842 and 1849. In 1893, the United States invades Hawaii with the landing of Marines and Gatling guns and armaments. And through United States support, the Hawaiian monarchy is overthrown and a provisional government takes power. I'm going to quote from the apology log as a description of this. It says, whereas in pursuance of the conspiracy to overthrow the government of Hawaii, and the United States minister and the naval representative of the United States caused armed naval forces of the United States to invade the sovereign Hawaiian nation on January 16, 1893, and to position themselves near the Hawaiian government buildings and Iolani Palace to intimidate Queen Liliuokalani and her government. Whereas on the afternoon of January 17, 1893, a committee of safety that represented the American and European sugar planters, descendants of missionaries and financiers, deposed the Hawaiian monarchy and proclaimed the establishment of a provisional government. This shows the Marine troops being stationed across from the palace and in front of what we see as the government building, now our judiciary building. I'm going to continue to quote. This shows the Queen leaving the legislature on January 15, and then this shows the Committee of Safety that became the provisional government that was acknowledged by the U.S. government in January 17. Whereas soon thereafter, on January 17, when informed of the risk of bloodshed with resistance, Queen Liliuokalani issued the following statement, yielding her authority to the United States government rather than to the provisional government. I, Liliuokalani, by the grace of God, and under the Constitution of the Hawaiian Kingdom, Queen, do hereby solemnly protest against any and all acts done against myself and the constitutional government of the Hawaiian Kingdom by certain persons claiming to have established a provisional government of and for this kingdom, that I yield to the superior force of the United States of America, whose Minister Plenipotentiary, His Excellency John L. Stevens, has caused United States troops to be landed at Honolulu and declared that he would support the provisional government. Now, to avoid any collision of armed forces and perhaps the loss of life, I do, under this protest and propelled by said force, yield my authority until such time as the government of the United States shall, upon facts being presented to it, undo the action of its representatives and reinstate me in the authority which I claim as the constitutional sovereign of the Hawaiian Islands. And so the Queen, surrendered, believing that the United States government would eventually reinstate her as the lawful monarch of the constitutional monarchy of Hawaii. She believed this because back in 1843, when Great Britain took over Hawaii from February 1843 to July 1843, eventually Great Britain did restore the King Kamehameha III as monarch. She believed the same would happen with the United States. Now, the provisional government immediately traveled by boat to Washington, D.C., and met with then President Benjamin Harrison to have him submit a treaty of annexation. But 1892 was an election year, and President Benjamin Harrison, who had indicated his support for the annexation of Hawaii, was now a lame duck president. In November 1892, President Grover Cleveland had been elected to the presidency. But because the inauguration at that time was in March rather than January, President Benjamin Harrison was still president, and he did submit a treaty of annexation for Congress to consider. But when Grover Cleveland became president, he withdrew the treaty, and he dispatched his own minister to investigate what had happened and to recommend to him what should be the U.S. policy toward Hawaii. And that minister was a congressman from Georgia, James Blunt. And upon the report of James Blunt that the U.S. troops had landed, Marine troops had landed, in what he called an act of war, and an undeclared act of war, that the United States government should reinstate the Queen as the constitutional monarch. I'm going to quote from the public law again. It says, whereas in a message to Congress on December 18, 1893, President Grover Cleveland reported fully and accurately on the illegal acts of the conspirators, described such acts as, quote, an act of war committed with the participation of a diplomatic representative of the United States and without authority of Congress, end quote, and acknowledged that by such acts, the government of a peaceful and friendly people was overthrown. And then again, quoting from the Apology Law, whereas President Cleveland further concluded that a substantial wrong has thus been done, which a due regard for our national character, as well as the rights of the injured people, requires that we should endeavor to repair, and calls for the restoration of the Hawaiian monarchy. Well, Stanford B. Dole, then president of the provisional government, refused to surrender control of the government to the United States or to the Queen. And again, quoting, it says, whereas the provisional government successfully lobbied the Committee on Foreign Relations of the Senate, referred hereinto after as the committee, to conduct a new investigation into the events surrounding the overthrow of the monarchy. And again, whereas the committee and its chairman, Senator John Morgan, conducted hearings in Washington, D.C. from December 27, 1893 through February 26, 1894, in which members of the provisional government justified and condoned the actions of the United States minister and recommended annexation of Hawaii. So the U.S. Senate Foreign Affairs Committee, unlike President Cleveland, justified the landing of the troops, saying they were necessary to protect American lives and property. And even though it was an undeclared act of war, the committee condoned the actions and recommended the annexation of Hawaii. And so we have a stalemate. On one hand, the president recommends the restoration of the Queen as the constitutional monarch. On the other hand, the Senate recommends the annexation of Hawaii. And so because you have this stalemate, the provisional government takes steps to then declare themselves now to be a Republic of Hawaii on July 4th, 1894, again invoking the U.S. Declaration of Independence on July 4th, 1776. And so now Hawaii is ruled as a republic, governed as a republic from 1894 until it becomes a territory in 1900. And on January 24, 1895, when the Queen was imprisoned in Iolani Palace, she was forced by representatives of the Republic of Hawaii to officially abdicate her throne. And that's a quote from the public law. The Queen, there was an attempt to restore the Queen, an armed insurrection or counter-revolution, shall we say, or insurrection on the part of Native Hawaiians in January of 1895. There was an attempt to then retake control of the government, and it failed. And the Queen herself was arrested and held in prison in Iolani Palace for her role, being accused of knowing about this overthrow but not revealing it or reporting it, and accusing her of being a conspirator in this restoration effort. The Queen, abdicating while she was in prison, wrote, when the Queen was finally released and allowed to leave Hawaii, she traveled to New England, to Boston, to live with her husband's parents, not parents, her relatives of her husband in New England, and she wrote her book, Hawaii's Story by Hawaii's Queen. In the book, Hawaii's Story by Hawaii's Queen, she wrote, "For myself, I would have chosen death rather than to have signed it, the abdication. But it was represented to me that by my signing this paper, all the persons who had been arrested, all my people now in trouble by reason of their love and loyalty towards me, would be immediately released. Think of my position, sick, a lone woman in prison, scarcely knowing who was my friend or who listened to my words only to betray me, without legal advice or friendly counsel, and the stream of blood ready to flow unless it was stayed by my pen." So in 1897, President McKinley now, in 1896, there was another presidential election. Grover Cleveland lost to William McKinley. McKinley is expansionist, and he, in fact, declares the Spanish-American War to expand U.S. Control and interests over and acquire insular colonies in both the Caribbean and the Pacific. President Cleveland attempts to have a treaty of annexation approved by the Senate, by a 2/3 majority vote of the Senate that is required for the ratification of a treaty. So President McKinley introduces it, and this is opposed by the Native Hawaiian people. And so in 1897, the organization is formed, the Hawaiian Patriotic League, or Hui Aloha Aina. Again, we have this Aloha Aina, meaning patriotism and support of our love and respect for our nation and our independence of our nation. And the Hui Aloha Aina League of Men and Women collect 21,000 signatures against the annexation of Hawaii. Congressmen traveled to Hawaii to have hearings for the annexation of Hawaii, and the Native Hawaiians rally against annexation and are petitioning against the annexation. The Hui Kalai Aina also circulates a similar petition, but it also calls not only for the independence of Hawaii, but calls for the restoration of the monarchy. They collect 17,000 signatures. So altogether, there's like 38,000 signatures on petitions. When a delegation is sent to Washington, D.C. to present these petitions to the U.S. Senate and to meet with the senators and to lobby against the annexation, Queen Liliuokalani, who is in Boston with her relatives, meets the delegation. She travels to Washington, D.C. and meets the delegation. And so the Liliuokalani and the delegation arrive in Washington, D.C., and they learn that 58 out of the 60 senators required for the passage of the annexation treaty, there are 58 senators willing to vote for the annexation of Hawaii. They're only 2 votes short of ratification. But they meet with the senators, they present the petitions, showing the widespread opposition of the Native Hawaiian people to annexation. And by the time the delegation leaves Washington, D.C. in February of 1897, there are only 46 senators prepared to vote for the treaty, and the treaty is defeated. How is Hawaii annexed? In 1898, Senator Newlands introduces a joint resolution of annexation. Again, quoting from the public law, it says, "Whereas on July 7, 1898, as a consequence of the Spanish-American War, President McKinley signed the Newlands Joint Resolution that provided for the annexation of Hawaii. Was never a treaty. There has never been a treaty of annexation. It has only been a joint resolution of annexation. And so many scholars today question whether the annexation of Hawaii was actually legal. Even at that time, constitutional scholars and scholars of international law and senators questioned and challenged if the annexation of Hawaii could be accomplished through a joint resolution of annexation. The only other time a joint resolution was used for the annexation of a territory was in the case of Texas. But in Texas, there was a plebiscite and a referendum affirming the will of the people there to become a territory and to support annexation. So there is a formal annexation ceremony based not on a treaty, but on the joint resolution of annexation on August 12th, 1898, again during the middle of the Spanish-American War. Hawaii is now governed from 1900 to 1959 as a territory under an Organic Act, and the economy is centered around agribusiness, and now the military begins to have a growing presence in Hawaii, such that by 1941, there is such a presence of the U.S. naval forces in particular, that Japan bombs the U.S. Navy there at Pearl Harbor. The Hawaiian language, as a policy of the U.S. territory, is banned and prohibited. English is the only language of official policy, official affairs, and only English can be the language of instruction in our schools. The military buildup on the island of Hawaii, Oahu alone, extends to 25% of Oahu. Here's the Marine Corps base, Hawaii, showing the fish ponds that were built over and burial grounds at a very sacred place in Mokapu. Same at Pu'uloa, where Pearl Harbor is, many fish ponds filled in, shrines to our fishing and shark deities destroyed, and the abundant fishing resources destroyed, and Diamond Head tunneled as a fortress. During World War II, we have martial law declared and a military government until the end of the war, and more Hawaiian land is taken over for military purposes. This is Makua Valley, where there are live fire shelling practices and training exercises, although this year there was an announcement by the U.S. Army that live fire exercises will no longer be conducted in Makua, and hopefully there's a process of repatriating this land to the Hawaiian people. But the U.S. government also took over burial dunes at Nohili on Kauai and Momomi on Molokai, and as well as the use of Pohakuloa and the entire island of Kaho'olawe. In 1959, Hawaii becomes a state. And interesting, instead of the Native Hawaiian people feeling closer to the U.S. government, we have a new renaissance, a new movement for Native Hawaiian sovereignty and Hawaii independence. And the focus of this movement for Hawaiian sovereignty is the island of Kaho'olawe that I spoke of at the beginning of this presentation. And this Kaho'olawe movement sparked a chord across the island chain from Hawaii to Kauai. Everybody could identify with the abuse that was happening, and our kuleana as Native Hawaiians to stop the abuse of Hawaiian land on the island of Kaho'olawe, and to again revive our practice of aloha aina, and to seek the true meaning of aloha aina, the other meaning of aloha aina for the sovereignty of our land and our people. And that also coincides with a renaissance of our Hawaiian culture, language, and dance. And through this movement and on Kaho'olawe, we also revive the spiritual practice of aloha aina, the honoring of our akua, our Hawaiian deities, such as Lono, during the makahiki, the wet season. So this is a photograph of the revival of the makahiki ceremony conducted on the island of Kaho'olawe to call the Lono entity, the Lono akua, the natural life force, to bring the rains, to bring the winds that carry the rains that will fill the water table and grow and help us revive and restore the island of Kaho'olawe. And this practice of makahiki has spread from Kaho'olawe to all the islands. We first conducted our makahiki on Kaho'olawe in 1982. We have continued to conduct it over the last, over 40 years now, on the island every year. And other military bases also have allowed access to the bases for these makahiki ceremonies. Here is shown our ceremonies. The upper left is ceremonies at Mokapu, also at Moku'ume'ume or Ford Island, as well as at Bellows. And in addition, access is afforded through military bases for fishing at Nohili, as well as at Mokapu and Bellows. Also part of the whole Renaissance is the revival of the navigational arts. This shows Hokulea, the canoe that has made the intentional voyaging to Tahiti and throughout Polynesia, and in fact around the world now. And this is the visit of Hokulea at Kaho'olawe. Hula flourishes, especially as celebrated in our annual Merry Monarch Festival. And Hawaiian healing practices are also revived. And so comes also the political quest for a rematriation of our national lands and our sovereignty and independence as a people, as a nation. And we have the apology in 1993 by the US Congress, again a joint resolution of both the Senate and the House. As the joint resolution of annexation, now we have a joint resolution of apology, which I'll quote, that the US government apologizes to Native Hawaiians on behalf of the people of the United States for the overthrow of the Kingdom of Hawaii on January 17, 1893, with the participation of agents and citizens of the United States, and the deprivation of the rights of Native Hawaiians to self-determination. So finally, an acknowledgement by both the executive, the president, and the Congress of the illegal role of the United States, an act of war in invading the Hawaiian nation and overthrowing the Hawaiian government. And the apology continues, expresses its commitment to acknowledge the ramifications of the overthrow of the Kingdom of Hawaii in order to provide a proper foundation for the reconciliation between the United States and the Native Hawaiian people, and urges the President of the United States to also acknowledge the ramifications of sovereignty for Kanaka Oiwi. In 2000, there was a report by the Departments of Justice and Interior to call for reconciliation and recommending an act of Congress to provide for a reorganization act for the Native Hawaiian government, which was introduced by Senator Akaka into Congress. It has unfortunately failed to pass, and he retired in 2013, has since passed. At the state level, the Hawaii State Legislature has acknowledged the right of self-governance for Native Hawaiians through Act 195 and supported the establishment of a Native Hawaiian role for Native Hawaiians to vote for delegates to a constitutional convention. There are 122,700 Native Hawaiians registered under this state role, or Hawaii role. And there was an organization that did hold a constitutional convention in 2016. That has not been ratified. And under the Obama administration, the Department of Interior passed 43 CFR Part 50, a rule to reestablish a government-to-government relationship with the Native Hawaiian community. And this is the decision that when and if Native Hawaiians reestablishes our sovereign government, perhaps under the Constitution that was drafted in 2016, that that government would establish a government-to-government relationship with the United States. There still is and are movements for independence for Hawaii, and different pathways calling for a reinscription of Hawaii with the UN Committee on Decolonization, and a process for self-determination, such as we saw in East Timor for independence from Indonesia, such as the process that's now being undertaken in New Caledonia or Kanaki to be independent of France, and which has been initiated as well in Tahiti to be independent from France. Another way is just to declare independence and seek recognition for a mass of countries in the United Nations. And we have a movement which says that Hawaii is, that since annexation was illegal, that Hawaii is occupied by the military forces illegally, and calling for the withdrawal and deoccupation of Hawaii. So that ends my presentation and review of the, using the public law as a review, Public Law 103-150 as a review of this relationship between Native Hawaiians and the U.S. government. I've come to the end of my time. I don't know if there is any time for any questions, which you might be able to put in the chat, but thank you so much for your attention and for joining this webinar today.
Davy, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. A lot of history in under 1 hour. So if folks have a question, please put it in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand and we can unmute you, please feel free to do so. Okay, if no one has any questions, I hope you will be able to join us for the third webinar, the second of today, Recognizing Native Hawaiian Reserve Rights. And that will begin at 10 a.m. Hawaii Standard Time, as well as 4 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll be on here for perhaps another 3 minutes if anyone has any questions or comments. Okay, Davy, so we'll see you again in about maybe 45, 50 minutes.
Yes, okay. Hopefully I can get my PowerPoint to present you again, and I'll change
Great.
I have all this light behind me now. All right, see you in a bit. Aloha.